Somewhere in your house, in a box you have not opened in years, there is a plastic tape with an afternoon trapped inside it, a birthday, a wedding, a face you miss, and there is no longer a single machine in that house that can play it back. The tape says VHS on the spine, 3 letters that ran the world's living rooms for 25 years. The company that invented them was not Sony. It was not Panasonic. It was a company that started as the Japanese branch of an American record label, the one with the little dog listening to his master's voice. It built the machine that put Hollywood on your shelf, won the most famous format war ever fought over a living room box, and gave its technology away to every rival it had. And then it disappeared into a name almost nobody says anymore. This is the story of JVC. JVC did something no company had done before, and no company has really done since. It invented a technology worth billions, and then it gave that technology away. It handed the blueprints to its rivals. It let Panasonic and RCA and Hitachi and Sharp and a dozen others build the exact same machine. That decision is why VHS conquered the world. Every expert at the time called it genius. What nobody knew was that the same decision, the openness that made VHS unstoppable, would leave JVC owning almost none of the empire it had built. The victory and the trap were the same move. Yokohama, Japan, 1927. A new company opens its doors on the waterfront, and its name is a mouthful, the Victor Talking Machine Company of Japan. It is not really Japanese. It is the local outpost of an American giant, the Victor Talking Machine Company of Camden, New Jersey, the most famous record company in the world. Victor owned a trademark you would recognize instantly even now, a small dog named Nipper, staring into the horn of a phonograph, listening to his master's voice. The Japanese branch existed to do one thing: build phonographs and press records for the Japanese market, and stamp that little dog on all of it. Then the ground shifted almost immediately. In 1929, back in America, the Radio Corporation of America bought Victor outright. Overnight, the parent company belonged to RCA, and the little operation in Yokohama became a distant, half-forgotten limb of an American broadcasting empire that had bigger things to worry about. Think about that for a second. Before it was 10 years old, JVC had already been sold over the heads of the people who worked there by owners on the other side of the ocean who had never seen the factory floor. It would not be the last time. Then came the war. Japan and the United States became enemies, and an American-owned company sitting in Yokohama was an impossible thing to keep. JVC was cut loose from RCA, left to survive on its own in a country that was about to be bombed flat. It kept the little dog. It kept the Victor name in Japan. It kept almost nothing else. The years after the war were brutal. JVC was, by most honest accounts, nearly bankrupt. It made radios. It made phonographs. It lurched from one financial crisis to the next, kept alive more by stubbornness than by any real plan. And then, in 1953, a lifeline arrived from an unlikely direction. Matsushita Electric, the enormous Osaka company that the world would later know as Panasonic, bought a controlling stake in the struggling Victor Company of Japan. Matsushita's founder, Konosuke Matsushita, made a decision that would define JVC for the next 50 years. He did not swallow it. He did not gut it and stamp his own name on the buildings. He left JVC to run itself, offering money and guidance and otherwise staying out of the way. So here is JVC by the late 1950s, owned by a giant but running free, small enough to be hungry, protected enough to take risks. It had already built Japan's first television back in 1939. It knew how to move pictures and sound, and somewhere inside that company, a handful of engineers were about to start asking a very expensive question. What if you could take television and put it in a box and let people keep it? The question came from the video division, and the 2 men who could not let it go were named Shizuo Takano and Yuma Shiraishi. Takano was not a marketing man or an executive with a vision statement. He was an engineer who had joined JVC in 1946, in the wreckage of the post-war years, and had spent a career around precision machines. As early as 1970, he said something that sounded, at the time, slightly ridiculous. He predicted that ordinary families would one day want to record television in their own homes, not studios, not broadcasters, families. In 1970, almost nobody believed there was a real market for that. JVC already had a secret weapon for the job, and it came from the audio side of the house. For years, the company had worked with a recording method called helical scaling scan, a way of laying video signals down on tape in long diagonal stripes. That expertise, built up quietly making professional gear, was exactly what you needed to shrink a room-sized video recorder down to something that could sit on a shelf. In late 1971, Takano and Shiraishi pulled together a team and did something that sounds almost quaint now. They stood in front of a blackboard and wrote out what the machine had to be. They called it the VHS development matrix, 12 objectives. The tape had to work with any ordinary television. The picture had to look like a normal broadcast. The cassettes had to be interchangeable between machines, so a tape recorded on one brand played on another. And the recording time, the objective that would decide everything, had to be at least 2 hours, long enough to hold an entire movie. Then the money vanished. In early 1972, the video industry in Japan hit a hard downturn, and JVC did what struggling companies do. It slashed budgets. The VHS project, expensive and unproven, was one of the first things on the chopping block. Management shelved it. Officially, the dream of home video recording at JVC was dead. And here is where the story turns into something you would not believe if a screenwriter pitched it. Takano and Shiraishi did not stop. They kept working on VHS in secret, inside a company that had officially canceled it, on a project that officially did not exist. No budget line, no blessing from the top, just 2 engineers and a small team who were convinced they were right and everyone above them was wrong. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. By 1973, working in the shadows, they had a functioning prototype, a real machine built on the sly that did what the blackboard said it would. When they finally showed JVC's leadership what they had been quietly building, the company that had killed the project reversed itself and threw its weight behind it. But JVC had a problem, and its name was Sony. Sony had not been standing still. In 1975, Sony launched Betamax, the first serious home video recorder aimed at regular consumers. It was elegant. It was well built. The picture was slightly sharper. And because Sony got there first, the entire industry treated Betamax as the standard, the format everyone would obviously rally around. Sony was the giant. JVC was the company whose own management had canceled this exact project 2 years earlier. Here is the detail everyone missed at the time. Sony's Betamax could only record for 1 hour. 1 hour. Not long enough for a football game. Not long enough for most movies. Sony had chased picture quality and a smaller cassette, and it had traded away the one thing Takano had written at the very top of that blackboard back in 1971, time. On September 9, 1976, in a ballroom at the Okura Hotel in Tokyo, the president of JVC unveiled the machine the world had almost never seen. It was called the HR 3300. By modern standards, it was a beast, roughly 30 pounds of metal and mechanism. But it did the thing that mattered. It recorded 2 hours on a single tape, and it did it on cassettes that any VHS machine from any company could play. Sales began in Japan that October, under the Victor name, with that same little dog on the badge. The United States launch followed in 1977. The machine that had been built in secret on a canceled budget by 2 engineers who refused to quit was now on the market, and it was about to start a war. The 2 formats went at each other for the better part of a decade. Betamax and VHS, Sony and JVC. Sharper picture against longer tape in an industry that had never seen 2 giants fight this openly over a living room box. For a while, it genuinely could have gone either way. But JVC had one more move to make, and it was the move that would win the war, make the format immortal, and quietly plant the seed of everything that came later. That move was a decision about ownership. And to understand it, you have to understand the kind of company JVC still was. It was the underdog. It had been sold over the heads of its own workers, cut loose in a war, nearly bankrupted, and rescued by a rival that let it run free. It had built its defining product in secret after being told to stop. When JVC looked at Sony guarding Betamax like a crown jewel, keeping tight control, licensing it narrowly, it made the opposite choice on purpose. JVC threw the doors open. It licensed VHS widely and cheaply to almost anyone who wanted to build a machine. Its own majority owner, Matsushita, built VHS recorders. So did RCA. So did Hitachi, Sharp, Mitsubishi, Magnavox, Zenith. JVC did not try to be the only company selling VHS. It tried to make VHS the only format worth selling. It worked because of simple math that Sony refused to see. Every new manufacturer meant more machines on more store shelves at more price points, which meant more VHS VHS tapes worth stocking, which meant video rental shops filled their walls with VHS, which meant the next customer walking in bought a VHS machine because that was what the movies came on. Sony was selling a better product to one company's customers. JVC was selling a standard to the whole world. You would think someone at Sony would have said something. For years, nobody with the power to change course did. The man at the center of it never behaved like a conqueror. Shizuo Takano was born in Yokohama in 1923, the same city where the company was founded. He studied precision equipment at a technical college, joined JVC in 1946 when the company was on its knees, and spent the next 4 decades turning a blackboard sketch into a machine in half the homes on Earth. Colleagues did not describe a showman. They described an engineer who had seen a future nobody else believed in and simply refused to look away from it. He got to watch it happen. He watched VHS beat Betamax. He watched his 2-hour tape become the way an entire generation recorded weddings, taped soap operas, and rented movies on a Friday night. He watched the format he sketched in secret become, for a time, one of the most successful consumer products in the history of the world. In January 1992, Shizuo Takano died in Tokyo of a respiratory ailment. He was 68. By the time he was gone, roughly 350 million VHS machines had been sold around the world. His obituary ran in newspapers on the other side of the planet, in the country of the record label that had founded his company and then sold it all those years ago. He died at the summit, and that turned out to be a mercy because he never had to watch what came next, because the very openness he had championed, the generosity that made VHS unbeatable, had built something JVC did not actually own. Takano won the war, but he had handed a copy of the winning weapon to every soldier on his own side, and when the war was finally completely over, every one of those soldiers would still be standing. JVC would not. By 1980, just 4 years after that ballroom in Tokyo, VHS had taken around 60% of the North American market. Betamax was not dead yet, but it was losing, and everyone in the industry could see which way the tide was running. By 1985, VHS accounted for something close to 90% of all VCR machines sold. The war was, for all practical purposes, over. JVC had won, and winning the format was only the beginning of the golden age. The VHS machine turned out to be a Trojan horse for an entire economy. Once tens of millions of homes had a machine that played a standard tape, an enormous new business bloomed almost overnight: the video rental store. Hollywood, which had once feared home recording as theft, discovered it could sell the same movie a second time, on tape, to people who had already paid to see it in a theater. Every strip mall in America grew a video store. Every one of those stores stocked its shelves with VHS, because that was the format the whole country owned. JVC did not just build a machine, it built the rails that home entertainment ran on for 25 years. Then JVC shrank it. In 1982, the company introduced a compact version of its own cassette, the VHS-C, a little tape about a third the size of the full one that slid into an adapter and played in any standard machine. And in 1984, JVC put that little cassette inside the product that would make VHS a piece of pop culture forever. If you're finding this interesting, hit subscribe. We cover the stories behind the brands that shaped hi-fi every week. It was called the GRC-1, and it was the first true all-in-one camcorder built around VHS. A camera and a recorder fused into a single object you could hold in one hand. It was bright red, unmistakable, faintly futuristic. And that same year, a film called Back to the Future put one in the hands of a character named Doc Brown, who held it up and called it a portable television studio. A generation of viewers saw that red camcorder and wanted one. JVC had made not just a product, but a prop in the decade's-defining movie. Consider what JVC actually controlled at this peak. Its format was in 90% of the world's VCR machines. Its camcorders were recording birthdays and school plays across the planet. Its little dog logo sat on shelves in Tokyo, and the JVC name sat on shelves everywhere else. Movies were released on its format. Rental empires were built on its format. For a stretch of the 1980s, it is not an exaggeration to say that home video was JVC's format running the world. But look closely at that empire, and you notice something strange about who was actually getting rich. Walk into an American electronics store in 1985 and count the VHS machines. You would find RCA and Panasonic and Hitachi and Magnavox and Zenith and Sharp stacked in rows, all of them selling the format JVC invented. JVC earned a licensing fee on the technology, yes. But the biggest sellers of VHS machines in the biggest market on Earth were not JVC. They were JVC's rivals, using JVC's own invention, building their own brands, keeping their own customers. JVC had made VHS the standard, but a standard, by definition, belongs to everyone. That was the whole point. That was why it won. And it meant that at the very height of its powers, JVC was watching a dozen other companies grow fat on the thing it had created, while it collected a modest toll and told itself the toll was enough. For most of the 80s, it genuinely was enough. The market was so vast that even a slice of it made JVC a major electronics power, flush with cash, expanding into audio gear, televisions, professional equipment. The company that had nearly gone bankrupt in the 50s was now a household name on 2 continents. The trouble with being a toll collector, though, is that you only get paid as long as people keep using the road. JVC's entire fortune was built on top of a single technology, not a brand people were loyal to, not a store they loved, a format. A way of putting pictures on tape, and formats do not last forever. Somewhere in the early 1990s, right around the time Shizuo Takano died at the summit, the ground began, very quietly, to shift again. A new way of storing movies was coming. It would not run on tape. It would not need JVC's invention at all. And it would take everything JVC had built and make it worthless in the span of a few short years. The enemy had a name, and it was 3 letters, the DVD. In 1996, the digital versatile disc arrived, and it was everything VHS was not. It did not wear out. It did not need rewinding. It held a sharper picture. It let you jump straight to any scene, and it fit in a case slimmer than a paperback. Next to a shiny silver disc, a bulky plastic tape that you had to rewind like a cassette suddenly looked like exactly what it was. A machine from the 70s. For a few years, the 2 formats overlapped, the way they always do. But the direction was never really in doubt. By 2003, DVD rentals in the United States passed VHS rentals, and the video stores that had built their walls out of black tape cases began, one by one, to swap them for discs. The rails JVC had laid for home entertainment were being torn up and replaced. And here was the cruel part. JVC made DVD players too. Everyone did. Because a DVD, like VHS before it, was an open standard that any company could build. Except this time, JVC had not invented it. It was just one more manufacturer in a crowded field, with no special claim, no toll to collect, no advantage at all. This is the strategic trap that had been hiding inside the victory the entire time. JVC's greatness was never really a brand. Think about it. People did not line up for JVC the way they lined up for Sony's Walkman or later for Apple. JVC's greatness was a format, a standard, a technology it had generously handed to the world. And a technology can be replaced. When VHS died, JVC did not have a fiercely loyal customer base to fall back on, or a second iconic product people craved. It had been the company that owned the road, and the road had just been paved over. If that had been the only problem, JVC might have weathered it. Plenty of companies survived the death of a product, but there was a second problem underneath the first. Look at the rivals. Every company that had spent the last 2 decades building VHS machines under license, RCA, Panasonic, Hitachi, Sharp, all of them, had used those years to build their own brands, their own factories, their own franchises far beyond videotape. They had taken JVC's invention and turned it into their own diversified empires. JVC had spent those same years as, essentially, the keeper of a format. When the format collapsed, the rivals it had enriched simply moved on to the next thing. JVC had helped build their houses, and now it stood outside all of them. The numbers turned brutal fast. Through the mid-2000s, JVC bled money, posting losses year after year, 4 years running. Its majority owner, Matsushita, the giant that had rescued it back in 1953 and let it run free for half a century, looked at the losses on its own books and decided it had seen enough. It wanted JVC off its balance sheet. What happened next reads like a company being passed around a table. First, JVC entered talks with an American private equity firm, Texas Pacific Group, that wanted to buy in. Those talks broke down. Then, in 2007, a different deal came together. The Japanese company Kenwood, a maker of audio and radio gear, together with an asset manager called Sparks Group, agreed to buy roughly 30% of JVC for about $291 million. Read that number again because it tells you how far the mighty had fallen. The company that invented the format that ran home entertainment for a quarter century, that sold hundreds of millions of machines, that put a camcorder in Back to the Future, changed hands, a third of it, for less than $300 million. And the entire stated point of the deal was to take money-losing JVC off Matsushita's books. Then came the merger that ended JVC as an independent company. On the 1st of October 2008, Victor Company of Japan combined with Kenwood to form a new entity called JVC Kenwood. Two struggling companies lashed together, hoping that one strong company might emerge from two weak ones. It rarely works that way, and it did not really work this time. It was not a triumph, it was a controlled landing. And the name went last. For years, JVC kept selling audio and video gear in Japan under that old Victor name, with the little dog still cocking his head at the gramophone horn. But in 2011, the global JVC brand replaced the Victor name for electronics. The dog that had been founded into the company in 1927, the American record label's mascot that survived a war, a near bankruptcy, and a format war, was quietly retired from the products. Look at what is left today. JVC Kenwood still exists. It is a real company, but it does not make the machines that made it famous. Its business now is largely car audio, the stereo in your dashboard, and two-way radios, the kind police and construction crews carry. Solid, unglamorous, invisible work. The company that once owned the way the world watched movies now mostly helps you find a radio station on your commute. That is the shape of the fall. It was not a scandal. It was not a fraud. It was not a single catastrophic mistake. It was just a company that won so completely and so generously that it gave away the one thing it would have needed to survive its own victory. Think back to those two engineers standing in front of a blackboard in Yokohama in 1971, writing down 12 things a machine would have to do. Think about them keeping that machine alive in secret after their own company killed it. They were not trying to build an empire. They were trying to give ordinary people something the studios and the broadcasters had always kept for themselves. The ability to press record, to keep a moment instead of watching it disappear. They succeeded beyond anything they could have drawn on that blackboard. The afternoon you have in that box, the face you miss, the voice you had almost forgotten, it survived because of a decision two men made to keep working on something nobody was paying them to build. It did not need a subscription. It did not need a password. It did not ask anyone's permission. It needed a tape and a machine, and for a quarter of a century, that was enough. That was the gift. That was the genius. That was the trap. JVC did not lose the format war. It won the format war so completely that it handed the prize to everyone but itself. That is the paradox. That is the price of an open standard. That is JVC. Next time on the Hi-Fi Archives, we turn to a company that did the exact opposite. A firm that guarded its designs like state secrets, charged a small fortune for them, and built a cult of owners who would never buy another brand, and still found a way to nearly destroy itself doing it. If you want to see how that story ends, the video is on screen right now.